Now, then you had another issue, which was after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, there were protests across the nation, and there were protests in Washington, there were protests in Portland, Oregon. What was Trump's reaction to the protests?
Well, he was very upset about them, outraged, particularly the ones in Washington, D.C. He thought that they undermined the United States on the world stage. They made him look bad. They made the country look bad. And of course, that's what led to the infamous meeting in the White House on Monday, June 1st of 2020, where he pressed me and General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to send 10,000 troops or be prepared to send 10,000 troops into the city to deal with protesters. And fortunately, that didn't happen because we, along with Bill Barr, pushed back pretty mightily on it.
Did he say something about shooting protesters in the legs?
Yeah, at one point he looked at the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it was a question. It was a suggestion in the form of a question where he said something along the lines of, "Well, can't you just shoot them? Can't you just shoot them in the legs or something?" And his idea was to bring in troops, shoot the protesters. That would quell the riots. It would send them fleeing, and it would send a message not just to D.C. but also to Portland and Chicago and other places where people were protesting.
Now, when he sent that, did you think about the Kent State incident in the 1960s?
Well, yes. I mean, we were all aghast by the suggestion, and I don't remember those times exactly at Kent State, but I've read enough about it. I've seen the films, and I knew what it would do to the country. I knew what it would do to the military as an institution, and in particular, our relationship with the American people. So, look, it was a bad idea all the way around. And what we continued to do instead was to push him to deploy law enforcement because it was a law enforcement issue. And to the degree that Bill Barr, the AG, needed additional forces, if you will, I offered up the National Guard as a supporting entity that would guard federal buildings and do those types of things, but would not engage the protesters.
What was the level of violence in Washington and around the country among the protesters?
Well, it was there, but it was a minority. Of course, in D.C. in the nights leading up to June 1st, we had buildings set afire, vandalism that damaged buildings and cars and private property. We had Secret Service and National Guard troops hurt seriously. And so there was violence, but not to the scale that demanded, frankly, bringing in troops en masse. What it required was law enforcement, working closely between the D.C. Police Department and federal law enforcement to ensure that people could protest. Because, look, you have a First Amendment right to protest, to speak, but you have to do so peacefully. And the purpose would have been to make sure they could do so peacefully, and peaceful protesters were not harmed or caught up in any type of activity by the violent protesters.